When people say America isn't a democracy, what they mean is that democracy doesn't exist so much on the federal level. It does exist on a state level.
There's ongoing debate about the extent to which the United States can be considered a true democracy. Some argue that the country's political system is flawed in various ways, such as the influence of money in politics and the way in which certain groups, such as racial minorities and low-income individuals, are disproportionately affected by various policies and practices. Others argue that the country's system of government is fundamentally democratic, even if there are areas in which improvements can be made. At the federal level, the United States is a democratic republic, meaning that citizens elect representatives to make decisions on their behalf. However, some argue that this system is flawed in various ways, such as the Electoral College, which some argue gives disproportionate power to certain states and groups, and the influence of money in politics, which some argue gives undue influence on wealthy individuals and corporations. On a state level, the extent to which democracy exists can vary depending on a variety of factors such as the strength of political parties, the level of civic engagement among citizens, and the extent to which voting rights are protected and encouraged. Some states have more democratic systems than others, and some have been accused of engaging in practices, such as gerrymandering and voter suppression, that limit the ability of certain groups to have a say in the political process.
Well, the fallacy in the arguments against the Electoral College is that it presupposes the idea that the United States is one nation, and so a popular vote should apply everywhere. This is a fallacy because the U.S. isn't one nation. It is in our name. We are United States ID. We are states that come together on certain matters and leave each other alone on others.
That is a valid point. The United States was founded on the principle of federalism, where power is divided between the federal government and the individual states. The Electoral College is one aspect of this federal system, where each state is given a certain number of electors based on their representation in Congress. This allows for smaller states to have a greater voice in the election process, which helps to maintain the balance of power between the states. However, critics of the Electoral College argue that it can lead to a situation where the candidate who wins the popular vote nationwide does not win the election, as was the case in the 2000 and 2016 elections. They argue that this undermines the principle of one person, one vote, and can lead to a lack of accountability and legitimacy for the winner. Ultimately, the debate over the Electoral College is a complex one that involves considerations of federalism, democratic representation, and the balance of power between the states and the federal government.
It doesn't undermine the principle of one person and one vote because we don't have one national election for president. We have 50 elections.
That is a valid point. Each state is granted a number of electors that is proportional to their population, and the people of each state get to vote for their preferred candidates. The winner of each state's election gets all of that state's electors. This means that each state has a say in who becomes president, and the votes of the people in smaller states are not completely drowned out by those in larger states. However, it is worth noting that the winner-takes-all system used by most states means that the preferences of the minority of voters in a given state are not represented in the Electoral College.
One person and one vote applies at the state level, but not necessarily the federal.
That's correct. At the federal level, the Constitution provides for indirect election of the president through the Electoral College, where each state is allocated a number of electors based on their representation in Congress. This means that the popular vote in each state determines which candidate receives that state's electors, rather than a single national popular vote determining the outcome of the election. However, at the state level, most states do have some form of one person, one vote principle for their state-level elections, such as state legislative and gubernatorial races.
That and a problem people have with the popular vote sort of deal is that it allows isolated large areas to have lots of control and not listen to voices outside of it.
Yes, that is a valid concern. A popular vote system would give more power to densely populated areas, such as cities, and could potentially ignore the voices and concerns of rural areas or less populous states. The Electoral College system helps to balance out the influence of different regions and ensures that presidential candidates must appeal to a broad range of voters across different states. However, some argue that this system can also lead to candidates ignoring certain states if they believe that they're already guaranteed to win or lose them.
I think that counties in red and blue states feel ignored at times because many times you'll have states that have a majority of counties, but the few counties the other ones have are more densely populated.
Yes, that's a common sentiment among many people living in rural areas or smaller towns. They feel that their voices are not being heard in the political process because the population centers in larger cities have more influence due to their larger populations. This can create a feeling of being overlooked or marginalized, which can lead to frustration and a sense of disconnection from the political system. It's important for politicians to recognize this and try to address the concerns of all their constituents, regardless of where they live or how densely populated their area is.